I never thought a simple sandwich could change my life until I saw her, trembling beneath the leafless oak. The biting wind gnawed at my bones, yet her hunger struck deeper than any cold. A single moment of compassion, tearing my lunch in half, and everything shifted. Her fragile smile held a promise I couldn't yet understand. That afternoon began like any other, though I carried the familiar weight of exhaustion on my shoulders. My morning shift at the bookstore had bled into hours of side work, and by noon, my body was already begging for rest. The turkey sandwich in my hand was hardly a feast. Cheap bread, thin slices of meat, a smear of mustard, but it was all I had to keep me going until night. The park I crossed each day was usually quiet, dotted with joggers and office workers clutching coffees. But that day, the benches stood empty, leaves skittering across the paths in the cold wind. And then I saw her. She sat under the bare oak, shoulders bent, a fraying shawl barely covering her thin frame. Her skin was pale, her hands trembling as though the cold seeped straight into her bones. For a moment, I froze mid-step. My hunger clawed at me, reminding me how little I had, how close I lived to the edge myself. Yet something in her eyes, a hollow ache that mirrored my own struggles, pulled me forward. Each step toward her felt heavy, as though I was walking into a choice that would alter everything. I hesitated, then tore my sandwich in half and offered her the larger piece. Her eyes lifted to meet mine. They were sharper than I expected, full of surprise and something unspoken, as though she had not expected kindness from anyone, least of all me. She accepted the food with both hands, her fingers brushing mine, fragile and cold. "Thank you," she whispered, the word barely more than breath, but somehow powerful enough to lodge in my chest. I sat beside her, unwrapping my smaller half. The taste of mustard and bread had never seemed remarkable before, but sharing it made every bite vivid. Around us, the wind rattled branches, scattering brittle leaves across the pavement. For a while, we ate in silence, two strangers tethered by a simple act. Her shawl fluttered in the gusts, revealing more of her frailty. Yet even in her weakness, there was a quiet strength in the way she sat upright, in the steadiness of her gaze. Hunger had worn her down, but it had not broken her. "My name's Sam," I said at last, breaking the silence. She looked at me for a long moment, then replied softly, "Grace?" The name fit her, gentle, resilient, carrying both fragility and strength. "This means more than you know." She smiled faintly, a smile that seemed to hold gratitude and mystery all at once. As we finished eating, I noticed something glinting in her lap, a gold-edged card, embossed with an emblem I almost recognized from an ad I'd once seen. Before I could ask, she slipped it back into her purse, as though guarding a secret. "Don't worry," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "You've already given me the greatest gift." A sudden chill swept through the park, making me shiver. Reluctantly, I stood. "I should get back to work," I said, though truthfully part of me wanted to stay longer, to unravel the story behind her weary eyes. She reached into her pocket and handed me a slip of paper. Numbers were written in neat, careful handwriting. "Please," she said simply, pressing it into my palm. I nodded, tucking it away without thinking, though the weight of it stayed with me. The rest of the day blurred. At my desk, I found myself staring not at spreadsheets, but at that small piece of paper, replaying her smile again and again. Something about the moment felt larger than life, as though the world had shifted slightly beneath my feet. That evening, I walked up the path to my small apartment, fatigue dragging me down. But before I reached the door, I saw it. A heavy envelope waiting in the mailbox, its surface gleaming faintly in the fading light. My fingers trembled as I pulled it free. Across the front, embossed in gold, were the words, "Vance Industries." I tore it open on the spot. Inside was a cream-colored card, the script so elegant it almost glowed. "Dinner invitation, Vance Tower, 7 p.m. I stood frozen on my doorstep, staring at the card. The woman beneath the oak, the one I'd given half my sandwich to, had sent me this. Grace. Who was she, really? And why invite me into a world so far removed from my own? The invitation felt like a door opening onto another life. But as I held it, I couldn't shake the question. Was I stepping toward opportunity? Or into a storm I wasn't prepared to weather? That envelope was the first ripple in a tide I couldn't control. She had repaid my kindness with an invitation into her world of power. Could I cross that threshold without losing myself? At 7 p.m., my life would pivot on a single evening, and I had no idea which way it would turn. The next morning, a heavy envelope lay on my doorstep, embossed with gold filigree and silent promise. My breath caught as I read the return address, Vance Industries, the very tower I'd only admired from afar. Inside, a single cream-colored card bore 4 words in elegant script. Dinner, tonight, 7 p.m. Curiosity warred with dread. Was this real, or had my life just become a cruel joke? The envelope lay in my hands like it might vanish if I blinked too long. Gold filigree caught the morning light, glimmering with quiet authority. I ran my thumb across the seal, half expecting it to crumble into ash, leaving me to wonder if I had imagined everything. Vance Industries. The name itself sent a tremor through me. For years I had walked past that gleaming tower downtown, its mirrored glass reflecting a life I never thought I'd touch. And now, somehow, I was being summoned inside. My small apartment suddenly felt unbearably cramped. Stacks of unopened bills stared at me from the kitchen counter, a constant reminder of how precarious my life was. I stared at the invitation, torn between disbelief and temptation. Was this genuine gratitude from Grace, the woman under the oak, or some elaborate prank that would leave me humiliated? I paced the living room, phone buzzing on the counter. It was my friend Carla. I snapped a photo of the invitation and sent it to her with shaky hands. Within seconds, her reply came. "If this is real, you'd better dress better than that shirt you always wear." I laughed, but the sound carried no humor. She was right. My closet offered little more than faded shirts and fraying pants. I picked the least worn button-up, smoothed it against my chest, and tried to convince myself it was enough. Standing before the mirror, I whispered, "You can do this." By evening, the sky had darkened to a stormy gray. My old car coughed and sputtered as I drove into the city, every red light another test of my nerve. I gripped the steering wheel tighter with each block, imagining her waiting for me, poised, powerful, and utterly out of my league. When I finally pulled up to the plaza, my breath caught. Vance Tower loomed above, its glass facade glowing like a beacon in the dusk. The revolving doors gleamed, polished to a mirror's shine. I cut the engine and sat for a moment, invitation clutched in my hand, my heart beating hard enough to shake my chest. Inside, the lobby was a palace of marble and glass. Golden chandeliers cast warm pools of light across polished floors, and a receptionist in a sharp uniform greeted me with a practiced smile. I handed over the card, half expecting her to frown and tell me there had been a mistake. Instead, she scanned it with a sleek reader. Accepted. A discreet gesture directed me toward the private dining level. I stepped into the elevator, its mirrored walls multiplying my nervous reflection. My faded shirt looked even duller in the glow of brass fixtures. The ascent was silent, each floor marker a countdown to something I wasn't sure I could handle. When the doors slid open, I stepped into a hushed foyer. Soft carpets muted my steps, and beyond an archway lay the dining room. Through its floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled under the evening sky. At the head of a long table draped in white linen, she stood. Grace. But not the fragile figure from the park. Tonight, she was radiant. Silk blouse, tailored blazer, posture that radiated command. Her transformation was so complete that for a heartbeat I doubted she was the same woman. Yet when her eyes met mine, the same warmth I had seen beneath the oak flickered there, tempered now with purpose. She extended her hand. "Welcome," she said, voice smooth and certain. My pulse thundered as I stepped forward. A waiter approached with champagne, the golden bubbles fizzing in crystal flutes. I accepted mine with trembling fingers, feeling as though I were holding more than glass. I was holding possibility itself. For a moment, the chandelier above rattled faintly, as though the building itself sensed the weight of this meeting. I looked up, unsettled, then back at her. She smiled, poised and unshaken, as if to assure me this was no accident. And in that charged silence, I realized I wasn't just a visitor. I was the guest of honor. As she extended a hand in welcome, the crystal chandelier overhead trembled faintly. An omen, or merely the building's hum? My heartbeat caught in my throat as I realized I was no longer a spectator, but the guest of honor. The waiter approached with champagne flutes, yet every drop felt charged with possibility. With her poised smile and my trembling resolve, we took the first step into a future neither of us could anticipate. The doors opened onto a private dining room overlooking a glittering skyline. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow on immaculately pressed white linen tables. She stood at the head, radiant in a midnight blue designer gown, extending a single white rose. My pulse thundered as I realized this was no ordinary dinner. The hush of the private dining room wrapped around me like a velvet cloak. Every detail spoke of a world far above mine. Tables draped in ivory linen, polished silverware aligned with military precision, and crystal glasses that sparkled like captive stars. Through the towering windows, the city sprawled below, a galaxy of lights flickering against the night. And there she was. Grace, though here she seemed more like Cordelia, the woman of power she truly was, stood at the head of the table. Her gown shimmered in hues of midnight blue, catching every flicker of chandelier light. In her hand, a single white rose rested, delicate yet commanding. When her eyes met mine, I forgot to breathe. "Welcome," she said, voice low but resonant. She extended the rose. My hand trembled as I accepted it, the petals cool against my skin. For a fleeting moment, I saw not a CEO, not an untouchable figure of wealth, but the same woman who had sat hungry under an oak tree. The other diners glanced up, executives in bespoke suits, socialites with diamonds at their throats. Their eyes flicked between us, curiosity sharp, judgment veiled. Some nodded politely, others whispered behind manicured hands. I felt the weight of their scrutiny press into my spine, but her calm presence steadied me. She guided me to a seat opposite hers. The velvet chair embraced me as if I didn't belong, yet refused to let me go. A waiter appeared instantly, pouring champagne into a glass that caught the light like liquid gold. The bubbles fizzed, playful yet solemn, as though aware they were christening a new chapter of my life. The courses arrived like a symphony. A truffle-infused broth that glowed amber beneath porcelain lids. Saffron cream pasta spun into threads finer than silk. Brioche topped with sea urchin, its briny sweetness melting on my tongue. Each bite felt like a doorway into a world I had never imagined tasting. I stole glances at her between bites, the way she tasted each dish with thoughtful precision. The way her eyes softened when she caught me marveling at something as simple as fresh herbs on a plate. She was both hostess and judge, both confidant and enigma. Our conversation began cautiously. She asked about my life, my job, my bills, the small kindness that had brought us together. I answered honestly, voice low, ashamed of how small my story sounded in this room of giants. Yet she listened as though every word mattered. Then she spoke. Her story unfurled like a tapestry, a childhood of scarcity, a youth of relentless ambition, nights spent clawing through betrayal and boardroom wars. She spoke of losing everything to a partner's treachery, of rebuilding brick by brick, of turning humiliation into empire. Her voice never faltered, but behind her calm cadence, I sensed loneliness, an echo of hunger that no victory could silence. The air thickened as she reached beneath the table and drew out a slim leather folio. Its gold-stamped spine gleamed with promise. She laid it before me and clicked it open. Inside, a contract. Pages of parchment thick with clauses, signatures waiting, equity shares, confidentiality. A seat at her table, not as a guest, but as a partner. My heart slammed against my ribs. This wasn't dinner. This was destiny, disguised in candlelight. I traced the embossed lettering, the clauses binding me to a future I couldn't yet comprehend. The pen beside it glinted silver, heavy with expectation. My reflection wavered on the polished table, a man caught between gratitude and fear. She leaned forward, eyes steady. However you choose, this evening will define us both. I swallowed hard, the weight of every unpaid bill, every sleepless night, every fragile dream pressing down. This was no charity. This was a test, a pact, an invitation to step into a storm I might never escape. The chandelier above trembled faintly, scattering shards of light across her face. She didn't flinch. I reached for the pen, hand shaking, poised on the brink of change. As I set my glass down, the lofty view of the city seemed to shiver, and a sudden crash rattled the windows. The chandelier trembled. Waiters froze in place. She straightened, eyes steely with resolve. They've breached security. In that instant, our gilded sanctuary became the first front line of a fight neither of us saw coming. The leather folio snapped open, gold-foiled clauses shimmering in candlelight. Equity shares, non-disclosure, non-compete. Each line felt like a weight added to my chest. My hand trembled as I traced the fine print, heart pounding at the gravity of every promise. Are you ready to change your life? Her voice floated across the table, both invitation and challenge. The folio before me felt heavier than steel. Its leather cover was warm to the touch, as though it carried the heat of the lives. It had already altered. I turned the first page, my eyes snagging on the bold header. Executive Fellow Agreement, Vance Industries. Beneath it, paragraphs stretched like endless corridors, clauses binding, promises glittering, dangers lurking in the fine print, equity shares, restricted bonuses, performance milestones that could erase every overdue bill and set me free from years of struggle. But each gift was locked behind chains, non-disclosure agreements that demanded silence, non-compete terms that threatened ruin if I strayed, forfeiture clauses sharp enough to cut through the very soul. My chest tightened as I read. A single slip, an unguarded word at a family dinner, a stray comment on the wrong night, could unravel it all. The paper might as well have been written in fire. I looked up. She was watching me. Her eyes, steady and unwavering, reflected both power and something gentler. Trust. It startled me. This wasn't a predator circling prey. This was a woman extending a hand, inviting me into a storm she had weathered alone for too long. I shut the folio for a moment, running my hand along its spine. My mind flashed back to that first day in the park. The brittle oak, the cold, the sandwich split in two. How absurd that such a small act had carried me here, to a table glittering with chandeliers and contracts that could alter the course of history. When I opened the folio again, I noticed the appendix, a section I'd skimmed before. It spoke not of profits or penalties, but of philanthropy, community engagement goals, programs for underprivileged families, ethical lobbying. It was her way of ensuring compassion remained at the core, that I remembered why she had chosen me. The realization hit me like a tide. This wasn't only about money, it was about responsibility. She wasn't offering me chains. She was offering me a platform, a chance to lift others the way I had lifted her. I closed my eyes. The steady tick of the clock on the mantel sounded like a countdown. My hand hovered over the signature line, the pen gleaming silver in the candlelight. I thought of my apartment's peeling paint, of long nights hunched over bills, of a life lived in shadows. Could I return to that now, after glimpsing this new horizon? Her voice broke the silence. "Whatever you choose," she said softer now, "know this. Your compassion is your greatest strength. Don't lose it." The words steadied me. I picked up the pen. It felt heavier than any weapon, a tool that could carve my destiny with a single stroke. My hand trembled, but the ink flowed smooth as I etched my name across the line. Each letter was a step forward, each loop and curve a leap into the unknown. The final flourish landed with a soft click of the nib. The contract gleamed under the candlelight, sealed with my name. My heart thudded against my ribs, a drumbeat of fear and exhilaration. But the moment of quiet victory shattered. A crash echoed through the chamber. Glass, splintering, alarms wailing, red strobes flooding the golden glow with violent urgency. The folio slipped from my hand, pages spilling like wings across the carpet. She was on her feet instantly, her chair scraping back, her eyes hardening into steel. "They've found us," she whispered, each word edged with fire. Her gown swirled as she crossed to the window, scanning the darkness beyond. In that instant, I understood. The pact I had signed wasn't merely about wealth or opportunity. It was about survival, and the test had already begun. The contract lay forgotten on the rug as sirens grew louder and security teams surged into the room. She drew me close, voice urgent. "Stay behind me. No one but us can handle this." Outside, the city's skyline flickered with the pulse of alarms. Our pact of possibility had become a pact of survival, and the real test was only beginning. Red strobes pulsed down the sterile hallway, each flash pounding like a war drum in my chest. Security doors behind us hissed shut, sealing off every exit in a metallic grave. She grabbed my arm and hissed, "Move, now." I sprinted beside the world's most powerful woman, heart lodged in my throat. The building itself felt alive, shuddering with each mechanical lock that slammed into place. Red light painted the walls in violent bursts, transforming sterile white corridors into a battlefield of shadows. My pulse matched the strobe's rhythm, fast, panicked, unrelenting. Cordelia gripped my arm with surprising strength, pulling me into motion. Her heels struck the polished concrete like hammers, every step sharp with determination. Behind us, the hiss of reinforced gates closing one by one sounded like tomb lids sealing shut. The sanctuary of chandeliers and contracts was gone. Now we were fugitives inside a fortress collapsing around us. We turned a corner, nearly colliding with terrified employees spilling into the hall. Faces pale, eyes wide, clutching laptops and files as if they were lifelines. Cordelia raised her wrist console, its display glowing with building schematics. Her fingers danced across the screen, bypassing systems, forcing open a maintenance hatch seconds before the lockdown froze it. "This way," she commanded, her voice cutting through the panic. The hatch yawned open, revealing a narrow stairwell. I guided a group of trembling interns and analysts inside. My words rushed but steady. "Safe room down this path. Go." Their shoulders brushed mine as they scrambled, fear and hope mingling in their eyes. Cordelia sealed the door behind them, locking in their safety with one final code. For a breath, her face softened. Then the alarms screamed louder, and steel returned to her expression. "We keep moving." We sprinted deeper into the labyrinth, past guards in tactical gear who hesitated before bowing to her authority. "Override Sector 7, she barked. One swiped his badge and keyed in new codes, opening a path. Forward. Their loyalty was written in the brief flash of respect in their eyes, before they disappeared, back into the chaos. At last, we reached the server vault. The door stood mangled, twisted by explosives. Inside, sparks rained from ruptured cables. Smoke coiled like snakes, and the air reeked of scorched metal. Emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across toppled racks. "Tear gas," Cordelia muttered, fitting a mask to her face. I copied her, the acrid sting biting at my nostrils even through the filter. In the center of the wreckage, An oak crate lay pried open. Nestled within foam was a single gleaming flash drive, the company's forensic backups, the one thing that could expose whoever had orchestrated this siege. My breath hitched as I lifted it. The cold metal seemed to hum with significance. Cordelia's voice sharpened. That drive holds everything. Proof of who's behind this. Guard it with your life. I slipped it into an inner pocket, pressing it against my chest. But before relief could take root, the sound of boots thundered from the hall. Shadows flickered. Masked intruders in black tactical rigs advanced, rifles raised, their movements too precise to be ordinary mercenaries. My skin prickled with dread. Cordelia grabbed my arm again. No time to fight. The drive is priority. Follow me. We dashed into the stairwell, the enemy's shouts echoing behind us, each step louder, closer. The stairwell was narrow, dimly lit by strips of flickering light. Cordelia moved fast, her gown now replaced by boots and grit. I stumbled after her, clutching the drive as though it were my heartbeat itself. Two intruders burst into view above us, lasers from their rifles slicing the concrete walls in red lines. Without hesitation, Cordelia slammed a keypad at the next landing. The door swung open. We dove through and slammed it shut just as bullets ricocheted against the steel. Now we were in a maintenance corridor far below, pipes hissing steam overhead. The air was thick with oil and urgency. She led me toward a rusted service elevator. The button glowed red. She pressed it, and the cage shuddered open. We climbed inside, doors clanging shut, the hum of cables groaning as it lifted us upward. My grip tightened on the drive, the bulk pressing against my ribs. My chest burned with questions. What if we were caught? What if I failed her? Cordelia sensed my fear. She leaned close, her voice steady despite the chaos. Remember why you're here. This isn't about data. It's about lives. Hold on to that. Her words steadied me, just as the elevator jolted to a stop. The doors slid open onto a dim lobby lit by a single emergency lamp. A stairwell loomed ahead, exit signs glowing faintly above it. For a moment, silence hung. Had we lost them? Then, the echo of pursuit returned. Heavy boots, closer now. We raced up the stairs, our breath ragged, hearts pounding like war drums. At the top, daylight spilled through a window. Cordelia ducked under the exit sign, shoving open a heavy steel door. The courtyard beyond glistened with rain. Ivy clung to cracked brick walls. At the far end, an unmarked van idled, engine humming like a waiting beast. We sprinted toward it. Behind us, the stairwell roared with footsteps, our hunters still on our trail. Cordelia yanked the van door open. I tumbled inside, clutching the drive. She slammed it shut behind us, breath heaving. For one heartbeat, it felt like safety. Inside the van's cargo hold, she locked the doors and slumped against the wall, clutching the drive like a lifeline. Outside, the courtyard's lights flickered as another engine roared into view, rival black SUVs bearing down on us. Her eyes met mine, fierce and resolute. This ride just got a lot longer. As the van's brakes screeched and doors opened, we braced for the next storm, together. Engines growled to life under a torrential downpour. A fleet of black SUVs slipped onto the deserted industrial road, our fragile lifeline. She slid into the lead vehicle, unshaken by the storm of chaos around us. I strapped myself in beside her, every nerve electrified by what lay ahead. Rain hammered the windshield like an army of fists. The convoy moved as a single organism, black SUVs snaking through the storm-slicked streets in disciplined formation. Their headlights cut ribbons of white through the curtain of water, but visibility was barely more than a few feet ahead. Every bump in the asphalt jolted my spine. Every gust of wind threatened to shove us off course. Cordelia sat beside me, calm, hands resting lightly on her lap. She radiated control, even as alarms still echoed in my ears from the chaos we had barely escaped. Her voice crackled through the convoy's comms. "Maintain 40. Jammers on my mark." Scout ahead in 60 seconds. The earpiece buzzed with confirmation as 2 SUVs peeled back, their roof-mounted emitters humming with electromagnetic pulses. The high-pitched whine undercut the roar of the storm, dissolving hostile drone signals before they could triangulate our position. I glanced upward and caught the faint red dots of drones blinking, then vanishing into the night sky. Relief lasted only a heartbeat before fresh anxiety filled its place. Our route was anything but direct. Cordelia had mapped it like a chess master. Back alleys, submerged culverts, and abandoned industrial lanes meant to keep pursuers guessing. The GPS tablet in my lap glowed red with waypoints, each one a lifeline guiding us toward the docks. My hands shook slightly as I traced the route, double-checking every turn. Outside, the storm deepened. Towering cranes at the shipyard loomed in silhouette, their skeletal arms reaching over the road like watchmen. Floodlights probed the rain-drenched streets, but we slid past them like shadows, our convoy blending into the industrial darkness. "Hold steady," Cordelia murmured, her eyes never leaving the blur of rain beyond the windshield. "If we flinch, we lose." I swallowed hard and gripped the seatbelt tighter. Minutes stretched into eternities as the convoy threaded through the maze of warehouses. Every splash of water on the pavement sounded like pursuit. Then the comms crackled. Multiple vehicles detected at 3 o'clock. Possible intercept. My chest tightened. The side mirrors reflected faint beams of headlights weaving through the rain. Black SUVs, but not ours. Rivals, deploy countermeasures, Cordelia ordered. The rear vehicle braked hard, sliding sideways across the lane to block pursuit. A metallic thump followed, the sound of spike strips dropping. Rival SUVs screeched, tires bursting, sparks flying in the storm. Our convoy surged forward, engines howling louder, formation unbroken. The van carrying the forensic drive remained in the center, shielded like a king in the middle of a living chessboard. My eyes darted to it again and again, terrified it might falter. Without that drive, everything we had fought for would be ash in the rain. We reached the waterfront just as lightning split the sky. The storm painted the dock in eerie silver light, revealing stacked containers and steel gantries dripping with rainwater. A warehouse door loomed ahead, our planned rendezvous point. But Cordelia's voice, sharp and unwavering, cut through the comms. "Trap. Don't stop." The lead SUV swerved violently, bypassing the warehouse, barreling instead toward a narrow service lane along the pier. The rest of the convoy followed seamlessly. Behind us, headlights swarmed, rival engines roaring to catch up. Our driver floored the accelerator, tires shrieking against wet asphalt. The convoy weaved through stacked cargo like a school of fish evading predators. Every turn tighter, faster, more desperate. Bullets sparked against container walls, muffled by the storm but close enough to feel in my bones. I pressed the flash drive satchel tighter against my chest, heart hammering in sync with the rain. Each second stretched unbearably, every breath a gamble. Cordelia reached across the seat and steadied my trembling hand. "We'll get through this," she whispered, her eyes fierce even in the storm's gloom. Her certainty anchored me. The comms buzzed again. "Overpass ahead." Convoy regroup in 30 seconds. I spotted it through the rain. A looming concrete bridge rising above the docks, glowing faintly under sodium lamps. It was our escape route, but only if we reached it before the enemy did. Engines screamed as we ascended the ramp, water spraying in glittering arcs behind the tires. The convoy merged onto the overpass in perfect unison, headlights aligned like a single unbreakable spear. Rival vehicles tried to follow, but a sniper's crack split the air. Sparks flew as a pursuing SUV's engine block shattered. The enemy faltered, spinning out in the deluge. Our convoy surged forward, safe for the moment. I exhaled, raggedly, chest tight from holding my breath. Cordelia leaned back, her composure unbroken. "First test passed," she murmured, "but the storm isn't done with us." As the convoy sped toward safety, My phone buzzed with an urgent alert. Arctic station breach. Immediate extraction required. Cordelia's eyes flicked to the screen, a spark of both fatigue and determination igniting within her. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon into the unknown. She pressed my shoulder and whispered, "Ready for ice." Floodlights carved jagged shadows across rusted steel pillars, turning the dockyard into a stage of war. Figures in black tactical gear advanced methodically, rifles lifted, visors glinting with reflected light. She stepped forward without hesitation, her arms raised high, unbowed by the threat at point-blank range. In that charged silence, I realized words, if wielded right, could cut sharper than bullets. The storm had not relented. Rain pounded the dockyard, turning puddles into trembling mirrors that reflected the floodlights glaring down from cranes above. The smell of rust, oil, and salt water blended into a metallic haze that clung to my lungs. The dock became an arena, and every beam of light transformed us into players on a stage none of us had rehearsed for. Cordelia stood in the open, arms raised, her posture commanding even in surrender. Her silhouette was fierce, a lone figure defying an army. I crouched behind a container, the forensic drive strapped to my chest, my pistol shaking in my hand. The enemy's rifles tracked her, their red laser sights crawling across her chest. "Stay calm," she whispered into her comm. She wasn't speaking to me. She was speaking to them. Somehow her voice cut through the storm, through the tension, freezing even the intruders mid-step. The rival commander stepped forward, tall, armored, visor glinting with rain. His rifle lowered just slightly, as if curiosity outweighed hostility for one fragile moment. The scar across his jaw flickered into view as lightning split the sky. Cordelia's voice rang out, steady as steel. Evidence for safe passage. Nothing more. Nothing less. The men shifted uneasily. The commander's gaze flicked to me, hidden but visible enough that he knew I carried something precious. My throat tightened, but Cordelia lifted a hand, silently ordering me to stay back. The commander's reply came low, gravelly, and reluctant. "If what you hold is true, then maybe tonight ends without blood." The floodlights sputtered in the storm, shadows stretching like knives across the wet steel. Cordelia unzipped her coat, producing the flash drive. She held it high, rain streaming off its metallic casing before extending it slowly. It glinted like a jewel in the white glare. The commander stepped forward, his men tense, rifles twitching with every heartbeat. When their hands met, the drive changing possession, it felt like the world teetered on a knife's edge. In that brief contact, they weren't enemies or allies. They were two titans acknowledging the cost of power. A second drive appeared, one stolen from us before. The commander gestured for me to approach. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself forward, exchanging the drives in the rain's relentless drumbeat. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then, without a word, the commander signaled his troops. They stepped back, rifles rising again, not in threat, but in ritual. They vanished into the shadows, swallowed by storm and steel, leaving us in uneasy possession of both drives. I exhaled sharply, shoulders sagging. Cordelia gave a single nod toward the waiting convoy. We walked together, the weight of the exchange heavy in my chest. But then, the commander's voice boomed across the rain. "Wait." My hand darted to my pistol, but Cordelia remained calm, her expression unreadable. The man approached again, a sealed dossier in hand. Rain plastered it to his glove, but he extended it with grim amusement. "Next target," he said, his voice rough. "Arctic coordinates. Survive that, and maybe you'll deserve the empire you're chasing." Cordelia took the dossier without flinching, tucking it beneath her arm. No thanks, no curse, just silent acknowledgement. We returned to the SUVS engines idled, headlights cutting through the storm. As I climbed in, she opened the dossier under the cabin light. The coordinates were clear. A remote Arctic outpost, isolated, buried in ice. My breath hitched at the thought. An even harsher crucible than this dockyard. Cordelia folded the dossier, her jaw set with determination. "Steel was only the beginning," she whispered. "Now we brace for ice." The convoy roared back to life, water spraying in arcs as we pulled away from the docks. The floodlights faded into the storm's veil, leaving only the dossier's weight and the dread of frozen horizons ahead. The convoy engines roared to life, water spraying in shimmering arcs behind the tires. I clutched the dossier, my mind racing with visions of endless white, frozen winds and dangers lurking beneath the ice. The storm around us was nothing compared to what lay ahead. And as the rain thundered on rusted steel, I realized this was only the prelude to a far colder war. Crystal chandeliers fractured their light into a million rainbows on the polished mahogany table, turning the boardroom into a cathedral of consequence. Every chair remained half empty, their occupants sapless and speechless as they absorbed the raw truth alighting the screens. She advanced to the podium with the quiet ferocity of a storm. No scripts, no safety net, just unwavering conviction. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city's pulse slowed, holding its breath for the verdict that would determine its future. The footage rolled across the towering screens, raw and unflinching. The dockyard exchange, tactical soldiers, the drive, glittering in the storm before passing from one hand to another. No narrator, no comforting edits, just truth, stripped bare. The boardroom, usually a space of polished civility, became a courtroom where silence was the only verdict so far. Executives sat frozen. Some paled, clutching their pens or tablets. Others leaned forward, curiosity etched into sharp features. The CFO's jaw clenched as his fingers tapped restlessly. Legal counsel's hand hovered over a blank page, but never moved. The marketing director, normally verbose, sat hollow-eyed. Cordelia allowed the final frame to fade into black before she lowered the remote. The chandeliers above cast fractured light, illuminating her as she strode to the podium. Her tailored suit gleamed faintly, not as fashion, but as armor. Her heels struck the marble floor with deliberate rhythm, each step an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice steady but resonant. "Last night our company faced its greatest threat, not from competition, but from betrayal." The words hung heavy. A ripple of discomfort stirred. I stood just behind her, the weight of my own story pressing against my ribs. When she paused, I stepped forward, inhaling courage. "I was there," I said, voice low but carrying. Dozens of eyes turned to me. I met her in a park, shared half a sandwich, never knowing it would lead me here. I saw her as a person, not a title, and I stood beside her through chaos that no balance sheet could quantify. Murmurs spread. Some skeptical, some intrigued. I pressed on. This company isn't only profit and loss. It is people, families, lives shaped by what we choose in this room. The CFO rose, cutting in. "With respect," he said sharply, "releasing this footage publicly would devastate investor confidence. Our duty is stability. Silence is stability." His words dripped with the cold logic of finance. Cordelia didn't flinch. She met his stare evenly. Stability built on lies is fragility. We can bury this, yes, pretend it never happened. But when truth emerges, and it always does, the collapse will be total. Or we can own it, lead with integrity, show the world that transparency is our bedrock. The room shifted uneasily. Voices overlapped. Concerns about contracts, stockholders, morale. The debate raged, a storm of fear colliding with principle. Cordelia stood unwavering. I echoed her resolve. For nearly an hour, arguments rose and fell, punctuated by the rain tapping against the glass wall behind us. Finally, the electronic voting pads lit up. Green lights flared one by one, slow at first, then steady. 5 green, 2 red. Majority won. A click echoed as the decision locked in, the tension released in a collective exhale. Cordelia allowed a faint smile, brief but powerful. The chair struck the gavel. "It is decided," he intoned. "Vance Industries will lead with integrity." Applause erupted, cautious at first, then growing, relief mingling, with admiration. But the moment fractured. Cordelia's phone buzzed, sharp and insistent. She glanced at the screen. The victory in her eyes hardened into steel. The message was blunt. "Offshore R&D facility under attack. Immediate response required." The applause died as quickly as it had begun. She looked at me, her voice low, decisive. "Gather the team. We move now." In that instant, the cathedral of consequence became a war room. The chandeliers above seemed colder, their fractured light a reminder that even victories had no time to linger. She strode from the podium, the gavel's echo fading behind her. I followed, carrying not just evidence, but the weight of a vow, to uphold the choice we had made, no matter the cost. As the first board members scrambled to secure the voting pads and seal the room, Cordelia's lips curved into a determined line. "Tonight we proved our mettle," she said, voice low. "Now we prove our mercy." She tapped her phone. "Deploy Rapid Response Team Omega. Coordinates inbound." In that charged hush, we realized this boardroom coup was only the opening gambit in a war that stretched from steel foundations to the frozen north. Dawn's early light broke across the plaza, illuminating a sea of camera crews, microphones, and satellite vans arrayed like an invading army. Flashbulbs detonated as she approached the podium, her silhouette carved against the rising sun in quiet defiance. In a single heartbeat, my role shifted from shadowy rescuer to co-spokesperson. No rehearsal, no retreat. Together, we braced to deliver unflinching truth to a world unaccustomed to such raw honesty. The plaza outside Vance Tower no longer looked like the familiar courtyard where employees once lingered on coffee breaks. Overnight, it had transformed into a warfront of perception. Tripods crowded every step, wires coiled like serpents across polished stone, and satellite vans idled with their dishes raised to the sky, humming with anticipation. Hundreds of journalists pressed close, their microphones outstretched as if they could pierce the distance between curiosity and revelation. The first light of morning stretched across their faces, glinting off lenses and glasses. The air tasted sharp, metallic, like electricity before a storm. The world wasn't just watching us, it was waiting to judge us. Cordelia emerged first, her stride unwavering, her coat's steel-gray fabric catching dawn's glow. She was no longer the woman trembling beneath an oak tree, nor even the commander who'd faced down armed soldiers on a rain-soaked dock. She was every bit the leader of an empire, unbowed, unafraid. As she stepped onto the dais, the hum of voices fell to nothing. Even the reporters, who lived to hurl questions, found themselves silenced by the authority in her presence. She raised her hands, a gesture both commanding and calming, and spoke. "Good morning." Just 2 words, yet they rang across the plaza with clarity and power. Silence deepened, as though every camera, every microphone, every heart had leaned forward. "Yesterday," she continued, "our company endured its greatest trial. Not a market fluctuation, not a product delay, but betrayal from within and attack from without. What you are about to see is unvarnished truth." The massive screens behind her flickered alive. Images unspooled in harsh clarity, black-clad intruders breaching the server vault, the convoy threading through torrents of rain, hostages stumbling free from a dim corridor. There was no narrator, no soundtrack, just raw footage that carried the weight of authenticity. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the reality of our night's ordeal unfolded, frame by frame. I had been content to remain in her shadow, but she turned, gesturing me forward. My stomach lurched as hundreds of cameras swiveled, their lenses locking on me. I swallowed hard, stepped up to the podium, and spoke. "My name is Sam," I began, voice trembling before steadying. "I met Grace, on a cold afternoon when she looked like nothing more than a hungry stranger. I gave her half my lunch, never imagining that moment would change everything. Since then, I have seen her not only as a CEO, but as a woman willing to risk everything for truth." A murmur rippled through the press. I pressed on, finding strength in the weight of memory. We faced corridors filled with smoke, convoys hunted through storms, standoffs where the wrong word could have meant death. Through it all, one thing remained clear. This company is not simply a machine of profits. It is people, families, human lives that matter more than numbers. Cordelia returned to the microphone. Her eyes burned with resolve. We could have concealed this, pretended nothing happened, but stability built on silence is fragility. Today, we stand here not with spin, not with excuses, but with truth. That was when the questions erupted, fast and furious, like bullets from every angle. What about your stock price? Can you guarantee safety going forward? Was this sabotage from within your own board? We answered without hesitation. Cordelia spoke of reforms, transparent audits, ethical oversight, accountability written into every contract. I described the new security dashboards, public metrics anyone could view, and an emergency fund dedicated to employees' families. Every answer was met with the staccato of shutters and the furious scribbling of pens. Behind us, the screens rolled again, this time not with chaos, but with resilience. Employees giving testimonies, hostages embracing their rescuers, clips of our team fighting back against impossible odds. Hashtags, like hashtag Vance Resilience and hashtag Truth in the Light, lit up live feeds across the world, spreading our narrative faster than we could speak it. Cordelia didn't end there. She invited employees and survivors to join us on the rooftop terrace. Together, we rose in a glass-walled elevator, the city sprawling beneath us, its morning hum beginning anew. Staff gathered, exhausted yet hopeful, their faces lit by the first golden beams of sunrise. Cordelia lifted her arms, and applause thundered from the rooftop. In that moment, truth became more than confession. It became connection. Vulnerability had forged unity, but as the applause waned, reality intruded. My phone buzzed again and again in my pocket, insistent. I pulled it free, glanced at the screen, and felt my blood turn to ice. Hostages taken. Dock 12. Immediate action required. I showed it to Cordelia. Triumph melted from her face, replaced by determination honed like steel. She nodded once, her voice low but unwavering. We end this today. Cameras whirred back to life as word of our new mission spread through the assembled press, capturing every flash of steel in her eyes. She stepped down from the podium, beckoning me to follow into the waiting SUVs lined at the curb. Dawn's hopeful glow now mingled with the dread of another desperate rescue. As the convoy roared through the awakening streets, I realized our reckoning had only just begun. Harbor lights shimmered on restless water, each reflection trembling like a beating heart in the mist. We slipped beneath towering cranes and rusted gantries like ghosts born of shadow, careful to avoid drone searchlights slicing the gloom. Her voice, barely more than a whisper over the roar of water on steel, cut through the tide. They're waiting. My breath froze in my lungs. Every second now carried the weight of lives perched on the edge of midnight. The harbor spread before us like a labyrinth carved from iron and salt. Massive cranes hunched over the docks, their skeletal arms frozen mid-motion as if giants had abandoned their work. The water lapped against the pilings with a restless rhythm, each slap echoing the thunder in my chest. The mist hung low and heavy, swallowing sound, cloaking danger in deceptive silence. We advanced in speedboats, 3 of them, gliding in staggered formation across the black surface. Our hull sliced through water smooth as glass, Yet beneath the calm ripples lurked the threat of discovery. Above, drones buzzed like metallic wasps, their red sensor lights scanning the docks with mechanical patience. One wrong move, one careless sound, and their alert would summon an army down upon us. Cordelia stood at the prow, her coat plastered to her frame by spray, her hair whipping wild against the storm's breath. Even in the shadows, her presence radiated certainty. She raised one hand, signaling for silence, then gestured toward the farthest warehouse, its windows glowing faintly through the fog. That was our target. The flash drive we carried had revealed where the hostages were held, a repurposed shipping facility, guarded by men who valued intimidation more than life itself. Inside, dozens of innocent employees, clerks, engineers, assistants, waited in fear, pawns in a game of leverage against us. As we drew closer, I checked the EMP device strapped to my chest. Its blinking light was steady, the coil ready to discharge. 3 seconds of blackout, Cordelia reminded me softly. Use them well. I nodded, tightening my grip on the small remote. The first drone swooped low, its beam carving across our path. I held my breath as it lingered, scanning, the whir of its rotors slicing through mist. Cordelia's hand closed over mine. Now. I pressed the trigger. The EMP pulsed silently, invisible waves rippling outward. The drone's light sputtered, its sensors blinked red, then its body spun helplessly before dropping into the harbor with a hiss. The mist swallowed its fall. Silence returned, broken only by the slap of water against our hull. We surged forward. The boats kissed the dock with barely a bump. I leapt onto the slick planks, boots sliding before finding purchase. Cordelia followed, her eyes never leaving the glowing windows of the warehouse. Our team fanned out, shadows slipping across shadows, rifles ready, but silent. The first guard appeared near the loading bay, cigarette glowing between his lips. He muttered into a radio, then leaned against a container, his rifle slung carelessly at his side. Cordelia signaled left. One of our operatives slipped behind him, silent as tidewater, and dropped him with a chokehold. His body crumpled without a sound, the cigarette extinguishing in a puddle. We pressed forward. Inside, the air smelled of rust, oil, and fear. Dim overhead lamps flickered, casting long shadows that quivered like restless ghosts. I heard muffled sobs before I saw them. The hostages, huddled behind a chain-link barrier, wrists bound, eyes wide with terror. 2 guards stood before the cage, playing cards on a crate. Their laughter grated against the hush, mocking the desperation surrounding them. Rage flared in my chest. Cordelia raised her hand, counting down with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. The flashbang detonated with a pop. White light seared the dim space, and the guards staggered, blinded. We moved as one. I shoved the gate open while Cordelia cut through bindings with a compact blade, whispering reassurances to each trembling hostage. Their relief was palpable, shaking hands, tear-streaked faces, eyes alight with fragile hope. Move quickly, Cordelia urged. Follow the light. A small strobe she had planted earlier pulsed above the exit, its rhythm like a heartbeat guiding them home. We herded the hostages out, shielding them with our bodies, each step echoing urgency. But the enemy was not blind forever. From deeper in the warehouse came the thunder of boots, the metallic clatter of rifles being raised. Shouts pierced the fog, sharp and guttural. Bullets cracked against steel beams, sparks scattering into the shadows. I felt the sting of one round ricochet close, a hot whisper grazing my arm. Go, Cordelia's voice was a whip. She stayed at the rear, firing controlled bursts, covering our retreat. I led the hostages through the dockside door, rain pelting us as we spilled into the open air. The boats awaited, engines primed. We rushed them aboard, hands pulling, hearts racing. I shoved the last hostage into the cabin, then turned back to see Cordelia sprinting through gunfire, her coat flaring like a battle flag. She vaulted over a crate, returned fire, and slid into the boat beside me. Punch it, she barked. The engine roared. Our boat lunged forward, spray exploding in arcs around us. Bullets trailed the water, tracer rounds slicing luminous scars into the night. Rival boats appeared from the fog, their searchlights stabbing wildly, but our jammer fired again, frying their sensors into darkness. We weaved between hulking barges, the mist thickening, waves crashing hard against the hull. Hostages clung to one another, faces pale but alive. Cordelia gripped the railing, her jaw set. "Hold steady," she commanded. The pursuit grew distant, swallowed by fog and static. At last, the northern channel opened before us, vast and dark, but safe. Our convoy awaited beyond, headlights shimmering like salvation across the waves. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours, lungs burning with relief. We had done it. We had pulled them back from the brink. But even in that victory, Cordelia's eyes remained hard, her focus fixed on the envelope she drew from her soaked pocket. Arctic coordinates, ink smudged but legible. "This is only the beginning," she said, voice hoarse but unyielding. Ahead, the sun's first light painted the sky in bruised pink and gold as we left the harbor behind. Cordelia held the glistening envelope to my side, her voice quiet but unyielding. "Are you ready for the Arctic?" My heart thundered once more at the thought of frozen wastelands and hidden laboratories. With the rising sun at our backs, we steered toward our next, and coldest, trial. Our launch carved roaring ribbons of foam through the moonlit harbor, the hull dancing atop restless waves as if fleeing a gathering storm. Rival spotlights pierced the midnight spray, like cutting lasers, their beams hunting us through the fog and rain. Bullets hammered the metal gunnel with deafening pings while I clung to the wheel, guiding us by pure instinct. Every surge of speed felt like borrowed life. Each knot gained a second, snatched from oblivion. The harbor, once a silent expanse of cranes and barges, had become an arena of survival. Water churned beneath us, black as tar, and just as merciless. Each wave struck the hull like a drumbeat of doom, threatening to toss us into the abyss. Spray lashed across my face, mingling salt and rain until my vision blurred. Still, my hands gripped the wheel like iron, refusing to let go. Cordelia crouched beside the hostages huddled in the stern, her voice steady even as gunfire split the night. "Stay low. You're safe. We'll get you out." Her calm cut through their terror like a lantern in darkness. They clutched blankets, some whispering prayers, others too stunned to speak. Behind us, black silhouettes pursued, enemy gunboats slicing the water with predatory precision. Their spotlights probed the mist, beams sweeping across the waves until they locked on us again. Bullets screamed, sparking off the gunnel, each ricochet a reminder of how fragile the thin shell of our boat really was. "Port side!" Cordelia shouted. I jerked the wheel, sending the boat into a sharp arc that made the hull shudder and the engine roar in protest. A spray of rounds stitched the water where we'd just been. My heart slammed against my ribs, but adrenaline kept my hands steady. The harbor narrowed ahead, funneling into a channel lined with rusted freighters. Their hulks loomed like sleeping giants, offering both cover and traps. I threaded the boat between them, the engine's growl echoing off steel walls, magnifying every sound. Spotlights slashed across the freighters, shadows stretching and collapsing in dizzying rhythms. Cordelia pressed her earpiece. "Convoy ETA. 2 minutes. Hold them off 2 minutes. It might as well have been 2 lifetimes." I slammed the throttle forward, forcing every ounce of power from the engine. The boat leapt onto plane, skipping across waves like a stone hurled by a desperate hand. The wind tore at my jacket, claws of rain digging into my skin, but I didn't dare ease off. One of the enemy boats drew parallel on our starboard side. Through the spray, I glimpsed masked figures, rifles braced against shoulders. A muzzle flash burst, the crack deafening, the bullet tearing a splinter from the seat beside me. Instinct took over. I veered sharply left, scraping so close to a freighter that sparks showered as our hull kissed rusted steel. The pursuers swerved too late, their spotlight smashing against the freighter's flank. "Nice move," Cordelia muttered, reloading her sidearm. She rose just long enough to fire a precise shot. One of their spotlights shattered, plunging their deck into darkness. Cheers rose from the freed hostages, brief but fierce. But victory was fleeting. Another boat surged from behind, its engine snarling, its bow cutting a white line through the black water. It rammed our wake, the impact jolting our hull so hard, my teeth rattled. The hostages cried out, clutching each other. I fought the wheel, forcing us back into balance. The channel opened ahead into the main harbor exit, 2 pylons marking the path to open water. Beyond them, salvation, our convoy, headlights already glinting faintly in the distance. But between us and freedom, the last enemy gunboat swerved, blocking the channel like a wolf guarding the only path out. Its spotlight fixed on us, blinding, unrelenting. Cordelia touched my arm, her voice low but certain. "Trust me." She rose in full view of the enemy, rain plastering, her hair to her face. Raising her pistol, she fired 3 quick shots. The first 2 sparked against steel, the third struck true, shattering their spotlight. Darkness swallowed their deck. The sudden blindness threw them off course, their boat veering just enough. "Now!" she shouted. I floored the throttle. The engine screamed as we hurtled forward, spray exploding in white arcs. Our hull skimmed the pylons, close enough for wood splinters to rain onto the deck. Then, freedom. We burst into open water, the harbor falling behind us like a nightmare fading into dawn. Behind, the enemy boats faltered, unable to match our reckless speed in shallow channels. Their engines whined, then receded, swallowed by fog and distance. For the first time that night, silence returned, broken only by the steady roar of our own engine and the ragged breaths of the freed hostages. Cordelia dropped back to the deck, rain streaming down her face. She allowed herself the faintest of smiles. "You did it," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. But relief was short-lived. My phone buzzed with an encrypted alert, its glow sharp against the darkness. I glanced at the screen, and my heart sank. Arctic Station under siege. Immediate response required. Cordelia saw the message and exhaled, not in despair, but in resolve. She pulled her coat tighter against the cold wind, eyes fixed on the horizon where dawn's first light glimmered. "Brush off the harbor," she said, her voice carrying the weight of steel. "We head north. Are you ready for ice?" The hostages huddled in silence. The sea stretched endless around us, and the rising sun painted the water in trembling pastels. We had survived one gauntlet, only to face another. As the SUVs rolled toward the staging area, the final shimmer of dawn danced on frozen fjords far to the north. Cordelia's radio crackled. "Team, prepare for sub-zero extraction. Coordinates dispatched." My mind raced with visions of icebound labs and howling winds, each breath crystallizing in the winter air. With the harbor's tumult fading behind us, we sped toward a frozen frontier, where new perils awaited beneath the aurora's glow. Sunrise spilled molten gold and rose across the docks, igniting every puddle and painted brick in hopeful fire. A cheering throng lined the quay, volunteers, rescued families, and grateful neighbors weaving banners of thanks through the morning mist. She squeezed my hand with a warmth that said we were no longer stranger and savior, but partners in a shared destiny. Together, we stood poised to cut the ribbon on the Vanguard Foundation and blaze a path from crisis into lasting change. The air that morning was unlike any I had ever breathed. It smelled of salt, of fresh paint, of flowers crushed beneath eager feet. Most of all, it smelled of renewal. Where once fear had hung heavy like smog, now laughter and applause rippled across the harbor. The plaza was crowded, workers in, orange vests, families clutching handmade signs, children waving flags with the new emblem of the Vanguard Foundation. I looked at Cordelia, standing beside me at the ribbon stretched across the entrance of our new community center. Her face glowed in the morning light, no longer etched with the tension of survival, but softened by triumph and purpose. In her eyes I saw not the CEO hardened by corporate war, nor the woman trembling under an oak tree. I saw the leader she was always meant to be, forged by compassion, tested by fire. The center behind us gleamed with glass and brick, its solar-paneled roof catching the sunrise. Wide doors stood open, revealing polished halls, classrooms, and aid offices ready to serve. Where once shipping containers had imprisoned hostages, now stood a place of freedom, built on the ashes of conflict. The crowd surged as the band struck up a hopeful tune. Reporters lined the perimeter, cameras flashing, eager to capture history in motion. Cordelia and I raised the ceremonial scissors together. For a moment, silence fell, an inhale shared by hundreds of souls. As the blades closed, the ribbon parted with a crisp snap. Cheers exploded, a thunderous wave that rolled across the plaza. Children rushed forward, their laughter mingling with the applause. Volunteers embraced one another, tears shining in their eyes. For them, this was not just a building. It was proof that kindness and courage could alter destiny. Inside, the center buzzed with life. One wing held an innovation lab with rows of gleaming computers. Children tapped on keyboards, learning coding basics. In another hall, families received fresh meals, doctors offered checkups, and counselors provided support for trauma survivors. Every detail echoed the vow we had made. Compassion first, transparency always. Cordelia guided me to the main hall, where a towering glass pedestal displayed our founding charter. Beneath crystal protection lay the signed agreement of the Vanguard Foundation. Its golden seal gleamed under chandelier light, engraved with 3 words: compassion, transparency, responsibility. I pressed my hand to the glass beside hers. For a heartbeat, our reflections merged. Stranger and savior, CEO and clerk, now bound as equals in purpose. We moved to the rooftop garden, where rows of vegetables flourished in raised beds. Volunteers tended basil, rosemary, and tomatoes destined for community kitchens. Drones hovered, loading crates for delivery to distant shelters. The harbor breeze lifted Cordelia's hair as she spoke softly. This is more than survival. It's a promise that no community will ever face crisis alone again. Her words sank deep into me. I thought of the journey, the half sandwich shared on a bench, the invitation in gold, the contract signed in candlelight, the harrowing escapes through storm and fire. All of it had led here. A foundation built not on power alone, but on a single act of compassion that had rippled outward until it reshaped the world. Downstairs, we joined the crowd for the unveiling of the digital network. A massive screen displayed live feeds, clinics operating in remote towns, shipments reaching disaster zones, children logging into free online classes. Charts tracked relief funds in real time, every transaction visible to the public. Transparency was no longer a slogan, it was a system. As the crowd applauded, my chest swelled with pride. But even as joy filled the air, I felt the vibration of Cordelia's tablet against my arm. Her face shifted as she read the new alert. Antarctic outpost under siege. Immediate response required. The contrast pierced me. Around us, people cheered, banners waved, music swelled. Yet in her eyes burned the knowledge that peace was fragile, always shadowed by the next storm. She turned to me, voice low but steady. We've only just begun. Pack for Sub-Zero. I nodded, heart thundering. Our journey wasn't ending. It was evolving. From Oak Bench to Boardroom Coup, from midnight convoys to harbor rescues, every chapter had been a step toward this moment. Now, the path stretched farther still, into frozen wilderness where our resolve would be tested again. We stepped outside onto the plaza. The sun blazed high now, gilding the water, warming the bricks, igniting the banners of the Vanguard Foundation. Behind us, the community center pulsed with life. Ahead, the Antarctic waited. Its silence, its peril, its secrets. I tightened my grip on Cordelia's hand. Whatever lay beyond, we would face it not as stranger and savior, but as partners bound by light. The echo of celebration still rang in my ears as Cordelia's tablet buzzed again, signaling coordinates for the Antarctic operation. She met my gaze, wind whipping her coat, and asked softly, "Are you ready for the ice?" Behind us, the Vanguard flags fluttered against the sky, symbols of hope now turned toward polar peril. With a single nod, we stepped into the future's cold embrace, our legacy of light guiding the way into uncharted white. If this journey from a snowy bench to a dawn of hope moved you, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss our next adventure. Smash the like button to show your support and share this story of compassion and courage with friends who need inspiration today. Drop a comment below, telling us your favorite turning point. Your voice shapes our future episodes. And don't forget to share this video on your social feed. Let's spark more acts of kindness together.